Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're going to get into something that is, I think, one of the most dizzying paradoxes in modern professional sports. We're talking about the rapid, really catastrophic failure of a coach who, only 2 years ago was basically hailed as the best in the game.
Yeah, we are, of course, analyzing the fall of Brian Daboll, the now former head coach of the New York Giants.
And the scene was Monday, November 10th, 2025. He's fired mid-season after just a brutal loss in Week 10. And this wasn't just, a disappointment. It felt like a complete organizational collapse, the kind of implosion you rarely see, especially after such a flash of success.
And that's the core of it, right? That collision of success and this incredibly swift failure, that's the contradiction we really have to unpack for you today. I mean, the central question is this. How does a guy go from winning the Associated Press NFL Coach of the Year award in 2022 to getting fired midseason with just a dreadful career record of 2041?
That record.
That winning percentage is barely over 33%.
Oh.
It puts him in like the bottom 15% of all modern NFL head coaches.
So our mission today is to really unpack the sources and see if this spectacular failure was maybe not a surprise at all.
Exactly. To see if it was, as some have said, visibly obvious for anyone who was willing to look past the shine of, that one great season.
Okay, so let's ground this right away in the final straw.
Yeah.
Because the team, they showed zero patience at the end. The catalyst was that crushing Week 10 loss to the Chicago Bears.
Dropped them to 2-8.
2-8.
And you have to look at the way they lost that game, because it's just a perfect little microcosm of Daboll's entire coaching flaw.
He had a lead.
A big one,
Yeah.
a double-digit lead. And this wasn't some, one-off thing. This was the team's fourth loss in a row.
And the fourth time they'd blown a lead like that.
The fourth time in 10 games.
Yeah.
10 games that the Giants lost a game where they held a double-digit lead.
I mean, that's almost statistically harder to do than just being bad from the start.
It is. It requires you to be good enough to get a big lead and then actively bad enough to give it all away.
It points to something systemic.
Absolutely. See, when a team just lacks talent, they get blown out. They're outplayed from the first quarter. But when a team loses like this, you see these patterns. You see poor clock management. You see catastrophic in-game adjustments.
A total lack of composure.
A total lack of composure, no philosophy for how to finish a game.
Yeah.
That pattern, it shifts the blame immediately from the players on the field to the guy on the sideline making the decisions. So we have to trace this all the way back through his career to really see why this downfall was maybe written in the stars years earlier.
Okay, let's start with the first huge red flag, which really became public the second he was fired, the secession plan. So Daboll's out, and immediately the Giants name the assistant head coach and offensive coordinator, Mike Kafka, as the interim. They give him a 7-game audition.
Which is just, the institutional irony there is.
Yeah.
It's just incredible, right?
So it's not lost on anyone who followed this team.
No, because Kafka wasn't just the next guy up. He was the absolute central figure in this long, simmering, really toxic power struggle with Daboll that had basically crippled the offense for 2 seasons.
So promoting him.
Promoting him was the organization's way of saying, we know who was at fault. It was a complete validation that Daboll's leadership was the problem.
And it's so wild because Daboll was hired to be the offensive genius, right? The guy who made Josh Allen.
Yep.
And he spends his entire tenure fighting with the offensive coordinator that he chose.
And that friction, it just reveals Daboll's own insecurity, his need for control. So remember, in 2022, that successful season, he let Kafka call the plays.
Right, and he gave me all the credit for it, Coach of the Year.
Exactly. It insulated him. But the second the team started to regress in 2023, what happened? The reports say Daboll started systematically undermining Kafka. He'd take back play-calling duties piece by piece until he finally just seized them full-time for that disastrous 2024 season.
And the result of Daboll taking over the offense was?
The Giants finished 31st. 31st in the entire NFL on offense in 2024.
Which is why we see something you almost never see happen. The owner steps in.
That's the huge tell. John Mara, who almost never gets involved in football ops, he reportedly made a point of recommending that Daboll give the play calling back to Kafka for the 2025 season.
That's not a recommendation.
Of course not. It's a directive. It's a directive rooted in the fact that Daboll's offense was a statistical train wreck and his micromanagement was destroying his own staff.
Yeah.
It proves the front office knew about his flawed judgment a full year before they finally fired him.
But even with that mandate from the owner, the sources say the temperament issues just kept going. He was still, exploding on the sidelines in 2025.
Right, threatening to take away play calling from Kafka after, like, a tight end drops a pass. A single mistake. The infighting was never actually resolved.
So that constant threat, that volatility.
That's the culture. And it means Kafka getting the interim job wasn't a reward. It was a clear repudiation of Daboll's leadership style. You keep the GM, Joe Schoen, who was part of the package deal, but you fire the coach and promote the coordinator he was fighting with. I mean, the writing is on the wall. The organization is pointing the finger squarely at Daboll's ego and his inability to manage his people.
Okay, let's look at the actual record itself, because the scale of this collapse is it's staggering. You really have to split his tenure into two completely different eras.
It's a study in extremes. First, you have what we can call the miracle of 2022.
Right.
He takes over a team that won 6 games. He leads them to a 9-7-1 record, gets them their first playoff spot in 6 years, and then gets them their first playoff win in 11 years.
Against the Vikings, that was a huge moment.
Huge. And that success, it was fueled by clever scheming, a lot of grit. He totally earned that Coach of the Year award.
Yeah.
No one can take that away.
But then comes the collapse.
Yeah.
From the start of the 2023 season until he got fired.
The record is just horrifying. It's 11-33, 11 wins and 33 losses.
That's essentially 2.5 years of winning, 1 out of every 4 games?
Exactly. That's what defined him. And inside that collapse, that 2025 season, that's where you find the most damning evidence of coaching failure. The inability to hold a lead. We mentioned it before. 4 blown double-digit leads in 10 weeks.
Yeah, let's get into the specifics of those, because this is where it goes from just bad luck to something that feels like coaching malpractice. Let's talk about that Dallas game.
Oh, the Cowboys' loss was just agonizing. The Giants' win probability in that game dropped from 94.6% to 0.
94.6.
You have a 19 out of 20 chance to win that football game, and you find the one pass to losing it. That doesn't just happen. That takes specific, poorly timed penalties, bad substitutions, terrible clock management.
But the one that sources say really broke the camel's back was the Week 7 collapse against Denver.
That's the one. That is the statistical black mark on his entire tenure. In that game, the Giants became the first team since 2003. Think about that. Over 2 decades.
Yeah.
The first team to lose a game after leading by 18 points with only 6 minutes left.
18 points.
6 minutes.
Up by 3 scores with 6 minutes to go. The win probability at that moment was 99.8%.
99.8.
It's mathematically almost impossible to lose that game. To do it, it requires a level of late-game panic and philosophical breakdown that is it's unheard of in the modern league.
Yeah.
This pattern proved, without a doubt, that Daboll could get you a lead, but he was completely incapable of leading the team to a victory.
So if the failure was that dramatic, and the temperament issues were so bad they were causing these internal mutinies, why did the Giants hire him in the first place? And that leads us right to this idea of the Peter principle, right? The idea that you get promoted to your level of incompetence.
Yes.
He was a great coordinator, maybe, but the promotion to head coach just exposed all the flaws.
Yeah.
That analysis is spot on. And the reason he got promoted so high is because his resume on paper was it was legendary. It was forged in 2 of the biggest dynasties in football history. And that pedigree, it acted like this brilliant marketing shield that just hid all of his very visible flaws.
Let's start with the Belichick connection, because that's the foundation, right? The Patriot way.
That's where it starts. He did 2 stints there, 5 years in the early 2000s. Then he came back from 2013 to 2016. All told, he walks away with 5 Super Bowl rings as an assistant under Bill Belichick.
Which immediately screams discipline, winning culture, strategy.
Everything you want. And then, maybe even more powerfully, you've got the Nick Saban connection, which gave him the rehabilitation he needed after his first few failures.
Kind of a career laundromat.
Exactly. After he flamed out as an NFL coordinator, he lands in Tuscaloosa in 2017 as the offensive coordinator for Alabama. He guides them to a national championship. And that 1 year, it allowed him to completely rebrand his entire image. He shed the stench of his NFL failures, and suddenly he's associated with college dominance and offensive innovation.
So you've got the Patriots dynasty plus the Alabama dynasty. For a team like the Giants, who were desperate for legitimacy, that's almost an irresistible combination.
You're hiring the guy who learned from the 2 greatest football minds of a generation.
But And this is the critical part. This is where the visibly obvious failure comes in. Daboll is maybe the textbook example of the Belichick coaching curse.
Right. And this isn't just some superstition. It's a real systemic thing.
Yeah.
Belichick's assistants fail as head coaches over and over again because they try to mimic the authoritarian style, but they don't have Belichick's CEO-level skills
Right.
or his, unimpeachable credibility.
They don't know how to manage people.
They don't. And you could see this foreshadowed years earlier in what you could call Daboll's coordinator disaster tour. It's a chapter of his career that the Giants just willfully ignored.
So this was between 2009 and 2012.
Yeah, long before Josh Allen made him famous, he bounced around as an OC, and the results were just anemic. In Cleveland, his offense has averaged around 15, 16 points a game.
Which in today's NFL is a death sentence.
You're basically starting every single game down by 2 touchdowns. It was a statistical black hole.
And it got worse after that, didn't it?
Oh, much worse. In 2012, he goes to the Kansas City Chiefs. His offense finishes dead last. Dead last in the entire NFL in points per game.
So by 2012, his reputation should have been cooked.
It was. League-wide, he was known as one of the worst offensive coordinators in the business. His career, based purely on performance, should have ended right there.
So he gets saved twice. First by Belichick, who brings him back, but not as a coordinator, right?
Wow.
As a tight ends coach.
A much lower stress non-play calling role. And then he's saved again by Saban, who gives him that Alabama job in 2017.
And that Alabama stint was the key.
That was the rebrand. It let him completely distance himself from a decade of failure. He wiped the slate clean.
Which brings us to the core analytical error the Giants made. Recency bias.
100%. The success with Josh Allen in Buffalo from 2018 to 2021, it created this spectacular, blinding recency bias. It was this one huge data point of success that just completely overshadowed all his earlier failures. And it made GMs think, okay, yeah, he failed before, but he learned from it. He fixed a quarterback. He's a guru now.
They focused only on the shiny new object.
And they ignored the decade of destructive patterns that history had already laid out for them.
Okay, so let's dig into that shiny new object, that one irresistible data point. The whole reason he got the Giants job was built on one single premise: the Josh Allen transformation.
It was the perfect narrative, wasn't it? Allen comes into the league, he's raw, inconsistent, a total project. And under Daboll, he turns into this perennial MVP candidate, back-to-back 4,000-yard seasons. The Buffalo offense is setting franchise records, finishing second in the league in yards and points. This didn't just create a coach. It created the myth of the quarterback whisperer.
So the Giants felt like they weren't just hiring a coach with a spotty past. They thought they were importing a system.
Right.
And that idea was made even stronger by the fact that he was a package deal with the GM, Joe Schoen.
And that package deal was explicitly about creating harmony. The Giants were coming off years of dysfunction, front office fighting, so the stated goal was organizational alignment. Let's bring in the whole Buffalo blueprint where the GM and the coach are in lockstep.
Which makes the internal dysfunction that followed, the fighting with Kafka, the feuding with Martindale, it makes it even more shocking.
The total betrayal of the entire reason they were hired.
And the mission for them was simple. It was almost desperate. If Daboll can fix a raw athletic talent like Josh Allen,
he must be able to fix Daniel Jones. They're failing. A former number 6 overall pick that they had so much invested in.
It was all about development.
All about development. And, in 2022, for a moment, it looked like it worked. But analysts, like Pro Football Focus, they immediately flagged it as a masterful illusion.
So what did they mean by illusion? What was the mechanism behind that one good season?
It was pure schematic wizardry. It was about protection. Daboll and Kafka built a system that brilliantly hid Jones's biggest weaknesses, which were slow processing and inconsistency from the pocket.
How?
They led the league in bootlegs and designed quarterback runs. They got him on the move, limited his reads, and relied heavily on play action. It was a fantastic short-term coaching job, a clever shield. But it was never a long-term developmental fix for the player himself.
And that's why the regression hit so hard and so fast.
Exactly. Once opposing defenses got a year of film on it, they knew exactly how to stop it. Contain the edges, force Jones to be a traditional pocket passer, and poof, the illusion shattered. The offense cratered 30th in scoring in 2023, 31st in 2024. It proved Daboll wasn't developing the player. He was just designing a very specific and ultimately fragile offensive shell.
And this was all made worse by the fact that he built a staff that was basically designed for conflict, not for cohesion, a team of rivals that he just didn't have the temperament to actually manage.
This, to me, is the ultimate indictment of his leadership. A great head coach has to be a CEO. You have to manage big, ambitious personalities.
Yeah.
Daboll went out and hired two absolute alpha dogs as his coordinators.
On offense, you have
Kafka, from the Andy Reid tree. He mentored Patrick Mahomes. He was already seen as a future head coach himself. He wasn't some subordinate just waiting for orders. He was a peer.
And on defense, you get Don Wink Martindale, a 60-year-old veteran from the John Harbaugh tree.
A guy who had interviewed for the head coaching job himself. A guy who commanded immense respect and loyalty. This structure demanded a CEO-type coach who could delegate and mediate. Daboll was the exact opposite. He was a hot-tempered, insecure micromanager. The clash wasn't just possible, it was guaranteed.
But hold on, what about Joe Schoen in all of this, the GM? If he hired this package deal for harmony, but then he lets this toxic mix of Daboll, Kafka, and Martindale just fester for 2 years, isn't he just as complicit in ignoring the obvious?
That's a really important question for you to think about. Schoen, who survived the firing, definitely benefited from the fact that Daboll was the one with the most visible, volatile flaws. But Schoen's judgment in putting that staff together in the first place, it absolutely raises questions. Did he really think Daboll could manage those personalities, or was he just hoping that Josh Allen guru magic would paper over everything else?
Okay, let's move to the part of this that really confirms that Peter Principle diagnosis. The controversies that just plagued his final 2 years. These weren't just distractions, they were a direct result of his temperament.
Yes, they were the final, visibly obvious proof that he was just unsuited for the job. The core flaw, according to sources inside the organization, was his management style. He was described as erratic and irrational.
Lacking composure.
Right, and he would dress down his assistants in a way that was personal, not professional. This wasn't that, healthy, controlled fire that can motivate a team. This was just destructive volatility. It created an environment of fear.
And the most public, explosive example of this was the Wink Martindale mutiny in January of 2024.
Oh, that was a total organizational rupture. It turned a private staff conflict into a national PR nightmare.
So what was the trigger?
The trigger was Daboll telling Martindale that he was going to fire Martindale's two most trusted assistants, the Wilkins brothers, who had been with him for years. Yeah. This was a pure power play, Daboll trying to assert total control over the defense.
But it just backfired on him completely.
It was a detonation. Martindale was furious. He reportedly cursed out Brian Daboll in the office, yelling, "F you!" And then he just stormed out. He physically left the facility, got on a plane, and went home without telling anyone where he was going.
I mean, you have to stop and think about that. The level of toxicity required for a veteran coordinator to just walk out on his contract and disappear.
It's a catastrophic failure of man management. It created this public toxic mess, and it showed everyone that his leadership style was based on intimidation, and that intimidation had finally completely broken down.
And that toxicity, it bled directly into the failure of his main mission, which was developing talent. Daniel Jones regressed. High draft picks stagnated.
The internal failure was bad enough, but you're right. The ultimate indictment of Daboll's coaching wasn't actually what happened inside the Giants organization.
It was what happened to players after they left.
Exactly. That provided the visceral, weekly proof that the talent wasn't the problem. The coach was.
So you look at 2025.
And Daniel Jones is having what's being described as an MVP caliber season in Indianapolis. And Saquon Barkley, who the Giants let walk, is having a 2,000-yard rushing season for their biggest rival, the Philadelphia Eagles.
The talent, once it was free of that system, thrived.
It thrived, which confirmed that Daboll was not some universal guru. He was a Josh Allen merchant. His system needed a once-in-a-generation athletic unicorn to work. When you applied it to mere mortals or to managing a whole staff, it was a complete failure.
So if the Martindale mutiny was the public mess, the concussion tent incident from week 6 of 2025, that was the single moment that just perfectly encapsulated everything wrong with his priorities and his lack of composure.
Look, this one is tough. It involved their prized rookie quarterback, Jackson Dart. He goes into the medical tent for a concussion evaluation during a really high-stakes game.
And Daboll, who is desperate for a win to save his job at this point,
is described as ripping mad. And he proceeds to violate a very clear, very explicit NFL protocol about player safety.
And he didn't just, hover outside the tent. The reports confirmed he was screaming at the team doctor to find out when Dart could go back in the game.
While the evaluation was happening, that is just, it's absolutely forbidden. It's an unforgivable breach of player safety, both ethically and professionally.
And the league came down on him hard.
Immediately. Daboll was fined $100,000 personally, The organization was fined another $200,000. It cost the franchise $300,000 because their head coach lost his temper and put his own job security ahead of the long-term health of their most valuable young player.
And the irony of it all is that his personal team motto, the one plastered all over the building, was smart, tough, and dependable.
And that single act was the absolute antithesis of all three. It wasn't smart. It was a rule violation that cost a fortune. It wasn't tough. It was reckless and endangered a player. And it certainly wasn't dependable. It showed a coach who completely fell apart under pressure, proving his hot temperament made him fundamentally incapable of performing the head coach role.
So let's synthesize this. We have the final tally, an 11-33 record in his last 2.5 seasons. The GM, Joe Schoen, gets to stay.
Which confirms the organization's internal belief. The talent wasn't the problem. The coaching staff was not getting the most out of the talent. The blame fell squarely on the volatile man at the top.
And that answers the paradox we started with, doesn't it? How was he hired when his failure was, in retrospect, so visibly obvious?
It was institutional weakness. The sources make it clear the Giants engaged in collective recency bias. The blueprint for disaster was right there in his coordinator failures from 2009 to 2012. He led some of the worst offenses in the league.
But they ignored all of that.
They let the narrative of the guru who built Josh Allen and the promise of alignment was shown just completely obscure a decade of documented failure.
He was sold as this rehabilitated figure, right? Corrected by Saban, ready for the big stage. The package deal was supposed to be his strength, but it immediately fell apart.
And that confirmed his core flaw wasn't tactical, it was managerial. The Peter principle was confirmed. As an assistant, his hot temper was insulated by CEO coaches like Belichick and Saban. They could manage his ego, contain his flaws.
But when he was the one in charge,
those same traits became catastrophic liabilities. He couldn't manage the staff, he lost the room, and his lack of composure led to public, financially damaging, and frankly, dangerous incidents. He was a great coordinator promoted to a job he was just fundamentally unsuited for.
It's a really sobering lesson in hiring, isn't it? The question isn't just if a coach can design a good play, but if they have the temperament to manage a massive organization when the pressure is at its absolute highest.
And that leads to a final provocative thought for you to consider. In the relentless pressure of the NFL hiring cycle is a spectacular, recent success story like developing an elite quarterback. So powerful that GMs are basically forced to ignore a decade of visible character flaws and performance failures. Or is the constant failure of the Belichick curse proof that, at the end of the day, organizations have to put demonstrated temperament and CEO-level management skills ahead of any spectacular but maybe anomalous tactical success? Something to mull over until the next deep dive.